Wonder Woman Wednesday.
Hello and welcome back to Wonder Woman Wednesdays, a podcast that takes a look at the classic Wonder Woman TV series, starring the incomparable Linda Carter. On the last Wednesday of every month, we break down an episode and we talk a little cosplay with the greatest fans in the world, Wonder Woman cosplayers. I'm your host, Stan the Man, and I wouldn't be me if I didn't once again bend the rules and break format, because this month's guest is not strictly speaking a cosplayer. Though she has dressed as Wonder Woman, she's also a very dear friend of mine and an actor working in film and TV, Carrie Anne Hunt. Carrie Anne and I are going to do our best through a haze of tangents, asides, and ADHD shenanigans to break down Season 1, Episode 5 and 6, in which Diana is joined by her younger sister Drusilla, played by Debra Winger in her first TV role. Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl must outwit the Nazis, who hatch a plan to invade Paradise Island, allured by the spell of the Feminum Mystique. Welcome to Wonder Woman Wednesdays. And normally what would happen here is I would read in a majestic voice the description of the episode, but I forgot to write one, so I'm going to do that later. So we'll just pretend that just happened. How about that intro, huh?
Amazing.
Just amazing. So I'm talking with Carrie Anne, and we are friends. I'm going to just disclose that right now. Like out of all the people I've talked to, except my wife on this podcast, I've known Carrie Anne probably the longest. And because we're both actors, we're both theater people. Well, you were a theater person. Now you're more of a movie person, right?
Yeah, that's true. My background is in theater, but I did transition into TV and film, and that's where I've sort of landed.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's the question every actor hates. They're like, oh God, I don't know who I am anymore.
Can you say your base of operations is Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm based in Atlanta, though I do travel around for work. And I have a theater degree, like you mentioned. We did a fantastic show together called Goddess and the Magdalene that still lives in my heart, like forever.
Yay. And if I may, like, so you played a goddess who also kicked ass. So That's very much related to what we're talking about today.
It is indeed. I got to learn, actually, for the show, I got to learn some Aikido.
Yeah.
That was the base for my fight scene where she takes on two guards.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And well done, I might say.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I started out in theater, and then when I got out of school, I got an agent and started doing television and film, and really just kind of fell in love with the immersion you can get on screen. But I still love stage work. I'm just a storyteller at heart, so I like being able to perform in whatever medium they let me.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you have done in the recent past, and that is related to this podcast, and I will say, not as related maybe as our usual guest. Our normal format is to talk to somebody who is a cosplayer, a Wonder Woman cosplayer, and who loves the Linda Carter TV series. And we've stretched that just a little bit today. So talk about what we might equate to cosplay.
Yeah,
like Wonder Woman cosplay.
Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of, I felt like this would be really interesting because I sort of came to know Wonder Woman through a job, right? I used to do live entertainment gigs, mostly for children, but also for charity and corporate events. And I frequently got cast as Wonder Woman. It's all the dark hair, I guess.
Yes.
It's kind of funny because I'm 5'4" and clearly not the size of an Amazon. But if you're 5 years old, I'm pretty tall.
Right.
And they put me in some of those kick-ass boots too, so that gave me another 3 or 4 inches.
Awesome.
But yeah,
awesome.
That's how I kind of came into Wonder Woman, was being paid to play her for events.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you later about how it was, interacting with kids, and you also teach kids, which I also want to talk about. But so the other thing is, as far as the Linda Carter series, you've never seen it before.
This was my first time. These 2 episodes, I feel like I'd seen clips of her, and thinking about it, I remember I have an older sister, and my older sister really loved Wonder Woman. So I'm sure that I saw bits and pieces. I don't think that's my dog. If you hear Collar
Oh.
shaking, she's come to say hello.
Yeah, yeah.
But like I remember, I've never seen an episode, like I YouTubed some clips, like when I was being hired to play her, I did, a little bit of research, because honestly, when you're interacting with kids as a superhero, you don't have to know everything, right? But I looked up some of her, but I really hadn't seen anything until today. Like this is like, I'm like a Linda Carter newbie completely.
Right. So I think that'll be really interesting. Like we're going to talk about this episode as though it's the first thing you've seen, because it is the first thing of Linda Carter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I definitely want to talk more about that stuff later. But let's jump into the episode. Normally, I'm almost afraid to. Normally, I would ask you, like, first of all, what's your overall general impression of the episode? But I just don't know if I want to jump in there. We could save it for later, or you could tell me now.
I'll just tell you now, because I feel like that's a good broad thing. So I went into this understanding that this was filmed in the 1970s, right? So I sort of knew that it wasn't gonna, like, Gal Gadot is my Wonder Woman. I love her. That's, the Wonder Woman film that she did, the first one. We'll pretend the second one didn't happen. The first one, it just blew me away. Right. Like I cried through the whole thing. And I saw it opening day in the theaters. Everybody, like the whole theater was like cheering and crying. And it just was just an amazing experience.
Right.
So I knew that the TV show was 70s camp. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, I thought it was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool. And also, are you familiar with Debra Winger at all? Like, have you seen Officer and a Gentleman, or?
Have seen Officer and a Gentleman.
Okay.
So good.
Because I mean, I've seen quite a few of her movies, and to see her this young was a little bit startling. Like, she's really young, and she's a
baby. Yeah.
I mean, she's 18, and it's her first. It's one of two of her first jobs. She also filmed a movie around this time. That was actually
cool first job.
I know. What a cool and I don't know that she liked it. Hearing about some of the trivia from backstage, she spent a lot of money to get out of her contract. So, but I don't know that necessarily she was having a terrible time, so much as she didn't want this to be her life for the next 3 years,
I could see that.
Yeah, because she's immediately sort of a sidekick, and I don't think from what I know about her, she doesn't see herself as a sidekick.
Yeah, and I think that was probably smart on her part, to be honest, because if she had done a film and this around the same time, she probably got a taste of what it was like to be, because at the time, like now, I feel like the lines between TV actors and film actors are very, very blurred, because TV has gotten so cinematic.
Right.
Back in the 70s, I feel like you were a TV actor or you were a film actor, and you didn't do both.
Absolutely. You're right. Yeah. And I can't remember when that changed, but there was a definite shift. But it was like later on, like maybe in the late 80s or the 90s.
I feel like, to me, and this is much later than that, to me, I think Game of Thrones changed everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because Game of Thrones, which is funny because I also have only seen a few episodes of Game of Thrones, which is bonkers because I'm such a fantasy nerd, right? But I just remember it changed the landscape, because it was like the amount of money they were spending per episode and the cinematic quality of each episode and the right, you know what I mean? So I feel like that kind of turned the tide with like starting to see shows, it kind of paved the way for shows like Outlander, which if you ever do an Outlander podcast, I'll be your guest every time.
Heck yeah.
But you know what I mean? I feel like that's one that I feel like that's where I noticed it, I guess, where you started seeing like the TV, like I used to be a movie person and now I'm more of a TV person.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think for whatever reason, Debra Winger did not want to stay in her contract. So she did this episode, well, this pair of episodes. She did one episode at the end of the season, and that was it. And I think they envisioned her to be more of a regular. So that's too bad. But also a lot changed about the show at the end of this season. They actually got canceled and picked up by another network, and a bunch of stuff happened. So she may have gotten out of her contract anyway without having to pay for it, but who knows?
Yeah. I thought the theme song, another thing I noticed, I was like, this is like the world's longest intro.
Well, I will tell you, my impression, and I don't disagree with you at all, but my impression is theme songs did used to be longer.
Yeah, they did.
But this is longer than other ones that I've heard. In fact, if I may be totally nerdy, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I realized that a lot of the intros that I was hearing were exactly 1 minute long. And so I would record them and just play them over different, like I would record the MASH theme song and play it over Taxi's opening, and then play the Taxi opening over Barney Miller, and it always worked out to a minute. But I think this is longer than a minute for sure.
It's gotta be. It's my favorite line though in the theme song is "in your satin tights, fighting for your rights."
Yeah, we love that one too, Laura and I. We've talked about it. It's appropriately goofy.
Yes.
Okay, so let's jump into this episode, and I'll try to be quick because, like, I think the unscripted conversation is a lot more interesting than me reading my notes. But I'll do my best to be fast. So the opening shot is John Saxon looking off the Virginia coast, and he sees a guy get dropped off by a sub, and you get the idea right away that these are two Nazis, and they're in the States, and something is going to happen. Like they're working undercover spies, if you will. And John's
with the boat. I don't know if you noticed that, but he has trouble with that rubber boat. Like, like when they're trying to get it on the shore, he's like flustered with the boat for a minute.
Yeah, and he does. I'll say this now, although it's not as evident in this scene, but that's a typical thing, like where they just stayed on him when they maybe would have cut away if they were doing a 1 hour episode.
Yeah.
But because it's a two-parter, a lot of these scenes are stretched out. Like we're really taking our time here when we don't always have to. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, we noticed the difficulty he has with his little dinghy. And I wanted to say John Saxon, we will recognize, or at least some of us, from the first place I saw him was Enter the Dragon, the Bruce Lee movie, but he was also on Nightmare on Elm Street and Black Christmas, which is a big old B movie, and I love it.
I've seen none of those movies.
No.
I don't know who he is. I don't even recognize his name.
See, I was gonna say, even if you haven't seen the big movies or can pinpoint them, he's got one of those faces where he's been in like a million, roles as the bad guy. But you didn't recognize him.
I didn't recognize him at all. To me, he had that very generic, like, I feel like we're still like in the 70s, we're still moving out of the transatlantic accent.
Oh, yeah.
And he has that like just old Hollywood. He just looks like an old Hollywood male lead to me.
Yeah, that's funny you say that about the accent. I was trying to figure out if he was, because a lot of the guys that play Nazis on this show will do a really sort of affected German accent, like a really crazy German accent.
But not this one.
No, they didn't. Well, there was one guy who is actually a Swiss German actor who comes up later. His name is Kurt Loewens, and he plays a general later on, and I'll talk about him. But anyway, so yeah, that's really interesting. He had a strange way of speaking.
Yeah, it was almost like they were trying, like, it was interesting because I was noticing that where I was like, they're not even trying to have a German accent. Like, they're not at all.
Well, I figured he was, he's been a spy. So he spends all his time trying to sound American. Right. But he doesn't quite sound American either,
No, it sounds like, well, a lot of it, I feel like a lot of like, you even hear it in Star Wars. It's that quippy kind of, it's an older style of acting,
Uh-huh.
that and you see like some of the residuals of it in some of these actors too. And I feel like you see it in him where he's just got that like affected sound.
Yeah, like old school actors. Like, are you
Yeah.
talking about like Ben Kenobi? Well, I guess he's British, so he doesn't count. From Star Wars, the Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay.
Like the guy before the guy the actor that played him before the Scottish guy. I can't think of either of their names
Ian
right now.
McGregor?
The guy before Ewan McGregor.
McGinnis?
Alec Guinness. Yes.
Guinness. Yeah, that's it.
Alec McGuinness. He's a well, anyway, we're going a little bit far afield. We're still on the shore with this
Yes.
submarine
Keep
and
going.
the guy with the bad dinghy. Okay, so we find out these spies are up to no good, right? So then we cut to Steve and Diana. And again, this is where like we would normally just cut to them at the airfield, but we see them drive up and show their credentials and all this stuff. And the spies are already there watching from a distance over some cows. They have cows in the way.
We have to prove that it's Virginia, I guess. Because I
That's
thought about
right.
that too. I was like, what's up with the cows?
So and then we get some exposition. What they're doing is testing a jet called the XPJ-1 jet. And everything up until now that you see on the show is done with propeller airplanes. And so this is the first jet you see. And I think, I can't tell in this scene, but I think Diana's sort of having a little bit of a private laugh at them because they're so excited about this jet. And she has a jet.
Right.
Like she has an invisible jet. Not only is it a jet, but it's invisible. So, and she's like, "Oh, you guys are so proud of yourselves for this little jet you got here." So, but I can't tell because Linda Carter really sort of underplays it, but that's what I was thinking while they were talking about
It was interesting because I was thinking about like the time period and I was thinking about how women are portrayed and things like that. And just like throughout both episodes, there is that like sort of stereotypical, oh, you guys are so clever.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it's very impressive. How does it fly?
Jet propulsion.
And it really flies?
Oh, like a bird. Are you ready? I guess so.
You really are a genius.
I knew you'd be surprised. This is why I've been taking that secret training course.
Surprised, I am amazed. Are you sure it's safe?
Oh, it's safe. It's incredibly fast and maneuvers like a dream.
That's wonderful.
But they kind of flip-flop around with like when she's on Paradise Island, they're like, all men are stupid and we hate them. And then when she's back there, she's like, oh, you guys are so smart. So
yeah, well, later on she has a little speech that maybe I'll sort of put in here when I edit. That's it sort of encompasses all that, because her sister asks her after she finds out she works for a man. She's like, what are men like? Because she hasn't really run into them yet. And she has this speech about, well, they're devious and they're honest and like all of these sort of dichotomies.
Yes, I don't much like it. You look too dowdy. Yes, it's a very necessary part of my plan. It allows me to be in military intelligence where I can know immediately where I'm most needed. I guess it must help. Yes, and it also enables me to stay close to Steve. Major Trevor. I work for him. You work for a man? Yes. He tells you what to do and you do it? Yes. What are they like, Diana? Men. Oh, they're like children. They're like gods. They're like geniuses and fools. They are all things.
Yeah. No, I remembered that because she says, well, they're fools and they're geniuses and they're this and they're that and they're everything at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which sounds like, I mean, it sounds poetic, but when you think about it, she's not saying anything.
Right.
I mean, she's just saying they're all different. They're just people.
Yeah.
But I still like the speech. There's just something about it and it's her delivery. I mean, she really,
yeah. Well, she's got this like sweetness and kindness to her that when she's saying it, you kind of know she's saying nothing, but you're kind of like, oh, it's nice.
Yes. So anyway, they're excited about their jet, and so the spies decide to act. And so there's other spies that are playing MPs, and they make some fuel tanks blow up. And so there's a big distraction, and then they start firing at people seemingly randomly.
Yeah,
And
it's very pew pew.
yeah, yeah. And so Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, Diana, runs off to the side because she's going to have to change into Wonder Woman. So the spies, the guy we saw on the shore, who was there specifically to fly that plane. Sorry, I realized I should have said who the actor was, but I wrote his name down like way later, and I don't want to get confused. So, because it comes back later. Spoiler alert, he doesn't die. So he jumps into the plane while Steve is running for cover, and then Diana changes into Wonder Woman. Now, have you seen that? You've seen that spin before, right?
Yeah, here's the thing is I was really surprised a little bit because I think I have seen it before, but in my mind it was different. Like
Really?
in my mind, it was much more because I used to we'll talk about this later, but when I would do the entertainment stuff for the kids, I would teach them the spin, right? But it was different. It was faster and tighter and almost not like Wakanda Forever, but more like arms crossed. And maybe that was like a Gal Gadot thing, or maybe that was something that evolved later because this spin it's a little clumsy, her spin. It's just this sort of slow kind of looks like it might have been a dance move at one point, but I was surprised that it was that.
Well, that's interesting you say that. It does come from a dance move. I mean, she helped invent it. Like they were trying to figure out how she did a transformation, and when they did the pilot, and she has some dance background, and so she suggested that. But she's also been doing this spin for 3 years, like over 3 years of the show.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of memes and gifs out there showing the spin from all kinds of different episodes, and it's possible that in one of them she may have held her hands in like that, and maybe that's one that you saw.
Because it looks like because I have a dance background too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what she's doing in the beginning in this episode, it looks like a very, very loose, almost like chaîné turn, which is like a pirouette, but without one of your legs up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like she's doing just this. I could get up and do it for you, but no one will see it.
No one will see it.
But you know what I mean? But it looks like just sort of this loose, but it's kind of this like loosey-goosey version of it, which is a little strange. And then later I just had in my memory that it was more of a tight spin, right? Where everything's pulled tighter in and it's faster. And it was interesting when I watched that because I thought, it looks like it just kind of it's kind of goofy.
Yeah. And well, I will say that when later on when Debra Winger tries to do hers, it's a little extra goofy.
Yeah.
Only because she's like purposely trying to fail at the first time she does it, but then the second time she does it, it's not much better, but at least she has more conviction.
Yeah, she's more into it. And I mean, it's when you look at when we get there, we'll talk about more, but when you get to Paradise Island, they're all in like Martha Graham dance outfits.
Yeah.
All of them.
That is a great way to describe it. I've been having trouble trying to describe what these outfits are.
They're dance costumes. Yeah, they're
okay.
100% modern dance costumes.
Well, so she does her spin, and she turns into Wonder Woman. She manages to fight the guards, but the plane gets away, which is a little weird because later on the same exact thing happens, but she can catch the plane right later. So I don't know why she gives up at this point, but she doesn't. It's okay because they have a failsafe and they blow up the plane. Right. Steve's like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. I got to get to the control tower.
I particularly enjoy the controls. It's literally 2 buttons where he's like, he pushes one and he's like, nope, that's going to do it. And he's like, oh, okay. Second button.
Yeah. Very, they wanted to keep things simple, I think, for the 40s there. So yeah, they blow up the plane, but of course the spy pilot manages to parachute out. so they go back to Germany, right? And so now the Nazi commander is yelling at the pilot, like dressing him down like he failed, but the plane blew up. What can he do? So the guy that's yelling at him is Major Hemschler, and he's played by Kurt Kruger, who is a German Swiss actor. He's not the guy that I was talking about before, but he is a German Swiss actor who was in a submarine movie called The Enemy Below. He's in a lot of stuff, but that's the only thing that sort of jumped out at me, although I've never seen it, so I don't know why it jumped out at me. But anyway, so this guy, he says, well, I guess the plane blew up, so it's a failure. However, there was a woman there who had bulletproof bracelets, and we should look into that. And so we go back to the U.S., and the other guy, John Saxon, whose name is Radel. I should start calling him Radel because that's his character name. He's with a park ranger who's also a Nazi, and they go to the park's ranger station and send a message to Germany about this Radel's still alive. The mission was a failure. However, and he's the one that points out to his Nazi commanders that America has a secret weapon, and it's a woman with bracelets.
The reason I snort laughed when you talked about him being with the park rangers, because there was this very conspicuous scene where he's hiding in the car, and the guy is some sheriff or somebody walks by and he's like, "Hot afternoon, sir," and he takes off his hat, and then they have this exchange where I was like, are they flirting with each other?
I thought that too.
It was very flirty.
Yeah, I was like, where is this going?
And then he walks away, and the guy pops up in the seat, and you're like, oh, okay, it was a cover, but what a weird 60 seconds that was.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those scenes that just didn't have to exist, but but they had the extra time, so why not? Yeah. So Radel tells his commanders that America has a secret weapon. It's a woman with bracelets, and we should definitely figure out what's going on there. Probably more valuable than a jet plane. Who knows? So then this major asks his commander, and this is the guy I was thinking of. What's his name? Ulrich. General Ulrich. I didn't write down. I think he's Swiss. No. He was born in Germany, but he was raised in Switzerland, right? And his name is Kurt Loewens, the actor. And the reason I point him out is because I have this very annoying habit of anytime somebody from this show is in MASH, I will talk all about it, even though it's a very minor credit for them. I don't care what else this guy's done. He was on MASH. He played, I think he was a general from Luxembourg. There was an old episode where a Luxembourg soldier somehow disappeared in the MASH episode, on the grounds of the camp. They just lost him. They knew that he died, but they didn't know where his body was, and so his commander comes looking for him, and that's this guy. And Henry Blake calls him a Luxembourger. And then the guy, they have a ceremony for the missing soldier, and then the missing soldier shows up because they're playing the national anthem of Luxembourg. That was a really weird little story, and I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The funny thing is I've never seen MASH, so I was listening to the cool sounds of the ocean while you were describing that.
You've never watched MASH?
No. My grandma used to watch MASH. I remember my grandmother watching MASH. She used to watch it before bed. But
sorry, I'm still trying to recover here. You have never seen MASH.
No.
We have a lot of work to do, Carrie Anne. A lot of work to do. So anyway,
when I visit you and Laura, what's going to happen is there's going to be an army tent set up in the living room.
All right, so I apologize for the meandering story about MASH. In my head, I told that a lot better and a lot shorter. But anyway, the dude's from MASH, and he's awesome. And so he tells the guy, look, if you believe that there's a woman with bulletproof bracelets, go after her, but it's your butt if it's fiction. So that's the plan. So now they're forgetting about the jet and they're going after not only, and the weird thing is, I don't think they normally would have noticed that her bracelets were bulletproof, because there's a lot more to notice about her.
There's a lot going on too.
Right. But I think because they, number one, they wanted to involve Paradise Island, and they wanted, that someone just came up with a story idea. They fixated on the bracelets, and he started, talking about like what if we had a bulletproof plane?
A superior, very strong woman. If only we could learn the secret of her strength and the bracelets she wears, the material from which they are made. Imagine, Hemschler, a panzer group with tanks that are impervious to Allied guns, submarines that cannot be sunk, aircraft that cannot be shot down.
Bulletproof tanks, and I'm thinking to myself, aren't tanks kind of bulletproof already? I think they are. Yeah. But anyway, he was very excited. So then we cut to Paradise Island, and
I have a lot to say about Paradise Island.
I'll bet you do. And I will say Paradise Island is featured in the pilot, and Laura was very excited about it. And she's like, I really wish they would just stay on Paradise Island. That's more interesting than, being in America, being in the city and all that stuff. Like, let's just do Paradise Island stuff. I imagine, being someone who has, seen the movie, the Gal Gadot movie, and that Paradise Island, this one might pale by comparison.
I will say, I love this Paradise Island for exactly what it is, which was probably a park in LA.
Yes.
It looks like Griffith Park or something, like it's really funny to me that like this is when I was watching it going, this was written by a bunch of dudes, because it's just like girls frolicking around in dance costumes, and they're like, their Olympics, I'm saying this in air quotes, are just like, it really looks like they're in someone's backyard. And there's a point where they pan the camera and you can see a modern building in the background that they probably just didn't realize.
Yeah, even the pilot episode, which was filmed roughly a year before this one, it was a little bit more interesting. I mean, partly they had a little more money, so they had more extras, and they were having competitive games like this one, but they were shot better. I mean, I will say a lot of the responsibility of your issues for this may fall on the director.
Oh yeah, well, the director, the studio, the budget, right? Like,
right.
There's so many, and probably actually not even really the director, because the producers are the ones that really control the money and things like that. A lot of times the director is the best with what they're given.
Right.
And I think it was just funny because it definitely looked like just a little gymnastics bar set up in somebody's backyard.
I know. And I was trying to figure out like the timing, like if this was near the 76 Olympics, if people were super excited about the uneven bars.
Maybe. Well, my favorite one is when they do a camera trick to make it look like the girl jumps over the bar, but it's the sound effect. It's the goes over and she lands it, but it's almost like it's weird. It's this weird blend of like, the show feels really feminist sometimes because she's, like in charge and kicking butt and things like that. And then other times it feels really reductive. Like when you look at it and you're like, oh yay, you jumped on the bar. Good, and they're all, and then I was like, they go off to fight and they're wearing heels and dance costumes. Just like, I don't. But the island looks better later when they're like, when we see the island towards the end, when they're like on the coast by the mine. Yeah. Then it looks like Paradise Island.
Yeah.
And and the we'll talk about the headdresses on the Queen later, but those are great.
Well, I will say, and this is probably not really news to you, but something that keeps coming up and something that's sort of becoming a theme of this podcast in particular is at the time that they did this, because it was the mid-70s, what's interesting, what's good about the show and a detriment is that they had to constantly seem to walk this line between yesterday and tomorrow, like between the progressive ideas like feminism and the patriotism that sort of drives the show. There's like patriotism and there's sex appeal. I'll just call it what it is.
Well, of course there is. Yeah.
Right. And so like trying to balance all that stuff to get the audience they want and the audience they need, maybe they don't always successfully walk the line.
Yeah, and you can see it. Like, it is interesting to me, like, because of course I'm like, she's fighting crime in a bathing suit, but I mean, that's like superhero women, at least of that era. It's changing now, but that was just the thing, and it is sex appeal. I mean, she's got both of them, Debra Winger and Linda Carter are gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there were times when, like, I'd be watching a scene where they're like, well, I guess I'm jumping ahead in the plot. Do you want me to jump ahead? We talk about
go, jump wherever.
There's a scene, there's like when they kidnap Drew,
Mm-hmm.
and she's in her little bathing suit and they're chloroforming her, and there's like 5 dudes in suits standing over a chloroformed girl in a bathing suit, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
But then it's fun when she throws him into the wall.
Right. And in fact, I wish when she threw John Saxon against the wall, he really should have been knocked out. And but he just opened his eyes. He's like, okay, chloroform her or whatever. He's like,
yeah, I know. Well, that's the funny part about it too, is that like it was entertaining, like to see them when they're fighting off the army and they're in these beautiful like goddess and or dance costumes in the water, just like flinging these men around, which was pretty funny, and you're like, is this meant to be funny? I mean, it's funny.
I think it's meant to be both funny and also empowering in a way.
Yeah. And I can see, you can see it where like you can see that line pretty clearly, because you can see sort of like where she's taking charge, and then like how she behaves with her sister, how she behaves with Drew, and or the other women, and then how she behaves like around the men. But you can see, though, a lot of that it's set in the 40s too, so I kind of understand that they're like following the rules of the time period too, and it's not always bad, like
right. Charlie's Angels and to an extent Bionic Woman were like this, but especially Charlie's Angels, like it was I think Kate Jackson, who was one of the driving people behind the development of Charlie's Angels, wanted it to be about female detectives, like a female detective agency. And Aaron Spelling, the guy who produced it, wanted it to be Jiggle TV. I mean, like he coined he coined that phrase.
I have never heard that phrase ever.
It's terrible. But
it's terrible, yeah.
But people threw that around in the 70s. Like that's the way they talked about these shows. Well, and it's horrible. Yeah. But I guess I would say Charlie's Angels somehow, I don't know how you measure success, like
right.
Charlie's Angels went on for 5 to 8 seasons. I don't know, but I know they ran through several actors. I think Jacqueline Smith is the only one that stayed the whole time. Anyway, we're talking about Charlie's Angels.
No, what does it say about the show? What we were talking about for a minute is that like you can tell that they're walking that line between, there's certain pieces of that show that were written for men by men, and then there are certain pieces of that show that were written by men trying really hard to write for women.
Yeah. And when we get to Paradise Island and the Calisthenics Festival, that's one of the times we fail. But speaking of writing, I did not go back and usually I guess at the credits is the time to mention who wrote it. And here's the interesting thing about this one. the credits, there's not a writer credit. There's a story by, and it's two women.
Okay.
And then teleplay by a guy. And,
right. Yeah.
And so, and you're in movies, maybe you know the distinction between
that basically like story means that those two women had input on the story, but the guy is the one. Teleplay, that is the script. So the script itself was written by the guy, but the two women, it's essentially like they were in the writer's room with him, probably. Like they would say, hey, I think this would be a good idea. Let's do this. What about this? How about this? But then he's the one that went away and physically wrote the script.
Okay. So the people in question are Barbara Avedon and Barbara Corday. And I think they work together often because they have a lot of the same credits on IMDb. The ones that jumped out at me were Fish. I don't know if you've probably never heard of Fish, but it's a spin-off from Barney Miller.
I don't know Barney Miller either.
Okay, so Barney Miller is the precursor to Hill Street Blues. Do you know Hill Street Blues?
By name only.
It's a cop show. It's a very successful cop show, but it's a sitcom. It's done as a sitcom, but it's actually a really good cop show. But it's like, I mean, it's interesting theatrically because these multi-camera sitcoms take place basically on one set. And they
so it's like theater essentially.
Exactly. And they managed to do this cop show for several seasons on one set, just in their little I forget what they call it, but the place where the cops are, and they have the little holding cell upstage. So everything could happen right there, and that's anything crazy. They needed to happen off stage, you could, you got information by phone, and then the guys would bring in. So it was, I mean, and in the beginning it didn't do that. They didn't, they had other sets, but after I think the first season, it all took place in the precinct house. So anyway, that was an excellent show, and it was an ensemble cast, and one of the cops was named Fish, and he was Abe Vigoda, and he is a brilliant, funny guy. He was in The Godfather, super cool guy, and his show was really good. And these women,
gotcha. Well, one thing that you can see is that, like, you can tell that there was at least like female input into the show, because they're not like, the one thing that's kind of nice that I enjoyed about it was that they never talk about Wonder Woman's appearance, like, ever. They only talk about like the bulletproof bracelets, and that she's dangerous, and that she's really strong, and that she's tall, but they never like, whoa, check out the body on Wonder Woman, which is really nice, like they, like for both of them, like they kind of fawn over Drew a little bit and how cute she is, but I mean, that's normal, right? But it's like, but I kind of noticed that. I was like, that's nice. It's nice that they're never like wowed by her beauty or talking about her body. They're always talking about like her physical strength and stuff like that. I did find it, you talk about it, because now I'm thinking about it, when you were like, they were trying to stretch that episode out. There were times where we shouldn't have stayed on somebody. They stay on her running too much because she looks silly when she runs. Like, if she runs for too far, right? Like when she runs after the jet the second time, when she grabs it and stops it, she's just trucking it down the runway. And you're like, we're just going to sit here for a good 30 seconds and watch her run down the runway. And they do it with Drew too. Like, she's like, all right, I'm gonna run up to the ranger station that's 3 miles away. You just see her like jogging up the hill.
Just as a side note, I can't remember where I heard this or saw it, but one of her stunt doubles, she had two stunt doubles that were there frequently, Jeannie Epper and Kitty O'Neill, and I think it was Jeannie Epper, but I could be wrong, said that she had a really unique running style and it was hard to emulate. And like she had to work on how to run like Linda Carter.
it was almost as if, and this is a weird thing, and I wonder just like the time period and all that stuff, if this played into it at all.
Mhm.
But it's almost as if they said, run like the stereotype of a girl. Because she she runs a little prissy,
Okay.
like she doesn't run like she means it.
Uh-huh.
Like when she's running, she doesn't run like something's on fire and people are going to die. She almost jogs, and it's kind of an interesting, I don't know, she just does something strange with her arms. And so it's like, but can you blame her? Look at the boots. Like you can't really run in boots like
Right,
that.
right.
So I
Yeah,
think
that
that's probably part of it. But it would just, when she would run and they would stay on her for too long, it was kind of like, it just kind of
yeah.
took
Like,
away from the like this powerful Amazon. You're like,
right.
girl,
Well,
I hope you don't break an ankle.
I mean, as an actor, for good or bad, sometimes the costume determines how you move.
All the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
every time. Yeah,
And
yeah, you're beholden to a costume for sure.
and this costume is not, it doesn't seem very forgiving.
No, and I've been in like I've done a lot of period dramas and stuff, and like sometimes you're like, well, if I look like I'm sitting down very slowly, it's because I have 40 pounds of steel hanging off of my waist to hold the dress out. And
Uh-huh.
if I sit down too fast, I just go down like a ton of bricks,
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not really blaming her for running funny. It's just like but I think it's just a thing. I think most people look kind of funny, look kind of goofy when they run if you stay on them for too long.
Well, I was gonna say, and I didn't want to insult her, but when Debra Winger's running in that race sequence at Paradise Island, she looks a little strange. I mean,
Yeah,
she's winning, so good for her. Whatever
yeah.
form you need to win, but she looked she she was
I
probably
feel like
having
unless you're watching an Olympic runner or someone who runs track like as a sport, unless you're watching one of those people run,
Mhm.
it's very clear that this is an actor that was told to run and
Yeah,
not someone who runs like understands the sport of running and runs like an athlete, you know?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Now we were talking about the writers, and I just want to mention, because I didn't mention his name, the guy who wrote the teleplay is Jimmy Sangster, and most of his credits start with the Hammer Studios. Like, do you know old like Hammer horror films? Hammer
No.
Hammer is a studio in England that mostly produced, I believe it's mostly, they're at least they're famous for it. A lot of the Peter Cushing like Dracula movies, and
Oh,
like
okay.
if you see a movie about Dracula in color and there's groovy 60s music, it probably came from Hammer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Which
yeah.
it makes some sense because there's a lot of like unusual groovy music at weird times in this episode too.
Well, I'll tell you part of that. You may not be aware, but there is some weird, like they have theme music for the airplane. And every time they show that airplane, they play this weird smooth jazz. And
Yes.
Linda Carter doesn't know why. Nobody knows why, except somebody who put together this.
Somebody thought that airplane was sexy and decided to play some smooth jazz. But there's also like when she's coming home to her apartment before we realize that Drew is in there and she thinks there's an intruder. And
Uh-huh.
she's coming home with her like very skinny bag of groceries that has maybe one stalk of celery in it. She, it's like that smooth jazz is there again, and we're like, oh, is it date night with Steve? Okay, you think it's kind of related to that, and then it weirdly transitions into this like mystery music because we think somebody's in the house, but when she's
Oh.
in the hallway, but it was like such a weird change, and I was like, what is going on? My favorite, though, you talking about like favorite lines. One of my favorite lines is Etta, good old Etta, right?
Yeah.
When they're talking and she's like, "Oh, please, can I come to dinner?" And Wonder Woman's like, No. And she's like, "No one ever takes me out to dinner." And she's like, "Well, I'll take you out to dinner." And she's like, "Well, you're not a man." And she said something like, well, I'm pretty happy about that. Or I wrote it down because I thought it was really funny. She says, she says, Etta says, well, you're not a man. And Diana just says, I've always been very happy about that. I just thought that was great.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great line. So one more thing about music. I don't know if you noticed, but when the plane is revealed, they play what sounds like the theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The ba ba ba, but they changed the notes slightly, so it's not the same song. I assume because they just didn't want to pay for the rights to it, or maybe they couldn't afford. Maybe they wanted it but couldn't afford the rights to it. Maybe. I don't know. That's either funny. Way, it's definitely a sound alike, but it's not the same music.
My other favorite thing that's just it's so campy and kind of glorious is when they show her in the invisible jet from far away. It is very obviously an inflatable toy with a Barbie in it.
Yes. Yeah. And this time, and normally people get used to seeing that who've watched the show a lot, but this time there's two Barbies in there because she's with Drew.
And is Linda Carter really that tall, or did they put her on apple boxes to make her taller so that Drew would look smaller?
She's really that tall.
Okay, because I was curious about.
I mean, she's. I know she's really tall, and like in the pilot, she had to, like when she was talking to her mother, who was played by Cloris Leachman in the pilot.
Oh, that's who that is. She looked familiar, and I couldn't figure out who she was.
Well, she's the one in this in
this
it's
show, different lady.
Yeah, but the reason she looks familiar is because she's Morticia Addams.
Oh, what? Wow. Okay. So they just made her look completely different.
Yeah, and for some reason her name is escaping. Carolyn Jones.
Okay.
Yeah, she's Carolyn Jones in this one, but anyway, when I keep wanting to call her Phyllis, Cloris Leachman played her in the pilot. Cloris Leachman's very short, and so she did stand on apple boxes when she was doing scenes with Linda Carter.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and Linda Carter is 5'9". So when she's in those boots, she's probably like almost 6 feet tall.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Drew got boots when she changed into her magic costume. I don't.
She did have boots. She had. Why do I remember this? Who knows? She had red boots with no stripe, and Wonder Woman has red boots with a white stripe.
Wow. If John Saxon paid more attention, he'd know that wasn't Wonder Woman.
Right. Well, the costume is completely different too.
Yeah.
Like because she's a teenager, she has straps.
Right.
Right. But I also, and you might know the answer to this, but I wondered this. I was like, why does she transform into a human American flag? Like why is her costume that?
That is a really good question because, and I honestly don't know, because in the pilot, her costume is made for her.
Right.
Like her mother specifically makes the costume, and she says that she makes it the colors that will reflect or represent freedom. She's saying without saying that it's the American flag, right?
Right.
And because that's, in the comic book, that's how it was designed.
Right.
But there's no, like, Drew never had her costume made for her. Right. It just magically appears.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things, I guess they just don't have to explain,
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, it's well, you kind of think about like, even though they're, Captain America makes sense because he's Captain America, and I guess it makes sense because she's sending her to America, right? That she would put her in that kind of an outfit, but it's always funny to me because it's like, let's put you in the most conspicuous thing we can find.
Right. But yeah, I mean I have my own, like, in my imagination, I have my own like sort of headcanon about how her costume appears, how the spin works, and like why, when she has a purse and does the spin, the purse goes away, but then when she does the spin again, it comes back. Like when she changes back. And it's because I'll just tell you, there is a
pocket dimension that it goes into.
Exactly. There's like a different dimension with a little changing room. And so she puts her clothes there, gets the new clothes, and it's a different time dimension. So no time passes when she changes, and then she comes back and stops the spin.
It's the only thing that makes sense. Well, and it's still funny to me. It will always be funny to me. It's funny to me with Clark Kent. It's funny to me. It's that, like, how stupid is Steve Trevor?
Especially in this episode, you have them both together. Like he sees Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl, or I guess that's her name. I don't know if they name her out loud.
They don't name her in this episode, not in this one. No.
I mean, I think they give her the credit. At least in the IMDb, it says Wonder Girl.
Yeah, they only call her Drew in the episode. And they don't call her anything in this episode yet, because this was like when she was still pretending to be Wonder Woman.
Right.
So they don't give her the moniker yet, but yeah.
Okay.
But it is funny to me that, like, they're both like, everyone's mystified, and they're like, these two strange women.
Yeah, like the guy who I haven't even mentioned yet, but the guy who fixes the plane, who winds up in the cell with her, he's like, she reminds me of this teenager that had a crush on me, and maybe my masculine wiles will work on her too.
That was the other line that I was like, if I'd been drinking something, I would spit it out, because it's Radel says to him, he goes, "Oh, so you think your masculine charms will work on her?" And he's like, and I'm like, masculine charms? Stop it. He's like, I'm a fully grown adult man, and I'm gonna go charm the pants off that teenager. And you're like, okay.
Oh, Peter. So Peter Knight is played by Charles Frank. And I guess he's known for being in The Right Stuff. What's that?
Oh, you froze. You're unfrozen now.
Oh, it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. That's bummer.
Why I like to yell back, "I'm not unstable, you are."
Peter Knight is played by Charles Frank, who's known for The Right Stuff. He's also been in 2 episodes of MASH.
Oh,
and in one of them, he was a pilot. And I won't go into some weird story about MASH. But I do remember him from MASH. I have one more story from MASH that I'll get to later, if we ever get to it. I don't know. Let me just try to quickly talk through this plot. So they have this plane, right, that they're excited about. I think that's where I actually left off in my notes. But anyway, that's where Peter Knight appears. I'm so bad at reading my own notes.
Well, I feel like the plot across the 2 episodes is pretty simple, and then you're right, they really stretched it out.
Yeah. In fact, I'm just gonna let go of my notes because it's more fun to jump around. I'm really, as an actor, I should be better at reading while I'm talking, but I cannot do it.
But I don't think so, though, because we're not used to doing that. We memorize our lines, and then we're used to being in the moment with the other person.
That's true.
So that's, and also I have ADHD, right? So, and I'm sure you do too.
I do. I have it bad sometimes.
So if you put the 2 of us together, we're going to have 17 conversations in one,
Yeah.
But like the basic, like to me, the basic thing was, like, oh no, Nazis. And then they want the fact that the bracelets are made out of can I say this? Femininium?
You're overcomplicating it. Your word is more interesting than theirs. They just call it feminum. Believe it or not. I know. I like yours better though. What is it? Femininium?
Femininium. It sounds more like, because when they first said it on the show, when they're talking about the bracelets, and they're like, I thought they were like, it's their feminine bracelets. And I was like, you did not just say feminine bracelets. and then I realized they were saying femium or whatever they're saying,
Right.
and like then we get to the island and the like, how are we going to defeat them? Let's pretend to have a girl fight in the water, and
Right.
then we'll
Right. Yeah, there is a little bit of overcomplication. Like, where is Drew? And Drew and Linda Carter, Diana, keep crossing paths, like sort of almost unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And
yeah. She also doesn't seem very concerned about the fact that Drew is missing. That was the other thing, is that whenever she's like, Steve's like, well, maybe you should go look for her. And she's like, I'm sure she's fine.
She's a 15-year-old in Washington, D.C. What could go wrong?
Jim, are you all right?
Just feeling a little foolish.
What do they want with you?
I don't know. They didn't even try to get any information out of me.
Where's Drusilla?
I'm sure she's all right. They weren't interested in her. The last I saw of her, she was safe at the side of the road.
Where could she have gone?
She's most surely back at the apartment, Diana.
It's just really funny because nobody ever seems overly worried that she's missing. And especially that she's missing for like a couple of days.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I'll just stay here and keep doing my work and it's fine. I just thought it was really funny. Even her mother, like when she goes back to Paradise Island and she's like, I don't know where Drew is. Her mom's like, oh. That's troubling.
Yes.
Like it's almost like there's like a sense of urgency that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you talk about like as actors, when you're like, you can't everything because you read the script.
Right.
But when you're in a moment, like in that scene, she's playing it. It almost feels like the actor is like not making it as urgent because she knows
the ending. She
the
knows,
ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's just the style of the show too, because if you notice, nobody really truly panics ever.
No.
Like everything is very chill.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it was the 70s.
Yes. Well, I do think that Wonder Woman has a weird tendency to well, it's not weird, but it is one of her characteristics. It's weird that other characters are taking it on, but Wonder Woman is always very confident and calm. Like in all the episodes, like she seems to always sort of be on top of things, and when she's in danger, she doesn't really seem like she's worried about it. Like that's a common thing for her. But it is weird that like her mother is that way when her daughter's missing. Well,
and also like all the men in the army were just kind of like, okay.
Like General Blankenship, like he didn't really I don't know that he knew that she was okay. Like he just got hustled into that car. Like anything could have happened to her after that. Like, and he's like, I'm sure she's fine. She was left in that car by herself.
She was left in that car by herself. What could possibly have happened? And then he was tied in that closet with like a rope that he probably could have snapped in half if he tried hard enough.
Very true.
That's what's funny to me too, is that like nobody ever really looks like they're in or when he's like, get in the car, I've got a gun on you. Okay. And he's like a military general, you would think that they would. But I mean, it's sort of like it feels very much like these things happen for the plot and we move the plot along quickly so that we can see people do cool things.
Yeah. Some of the stuff, it does feel like on the page it seemed really cool, and maybe the execution didn't quite go as planned.
Yeah, there was something at the end that I just did not understand, that I saw and I was like, how does this make sense? Was
it Wonder Woman stopping the plane by spinning it around?
Oh, that was weird on its own. Like I was like, what are you doing? I thought she was gonna like jump on the plane and climb in the window or something, right?
That's what that would make sense. But I that's one of the things I feel like, if you have it on the page, like Wonder Woman grabs a one wing and spins the plane around, disorienting the guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that might look cool if it looked like she really had the plane, but it kind of looked like the plane had her.
And some of it was the way that it was filmed, because I've noticed like the way that things are shot has changed a lot too. Like if you watch TV now, you would never just have that like long wide shot of her spinning the plane in circles. You would have had a close up of her like really struggling with the wing. You might have had some B-roll. There would have been more cuts.
Yeah.
You know, like because like the pacing of the show suffers a little because they don't have enough cuts. You know, it's more like theater in a way, you know, and they're being less like, now I feel like cinematography and stuff really has become like just as much of a storyteller as the director.
Right.
Or as the actors, right? That like cinematography has now become, I don't want to say manipulative, but it's very much like, it's just more involved. The shots are more dynamic. And at this point in like TV history, it seemed to be very much like wide shot, two shot, close up, you know, and there were times where they lingered on things for too long, like her running down the runway to get to the plane. You know, like where you might have cut back to people's reactions or something like that. And now she's at the plane and she's grabbing the plane, but we were just like, nope, there she goes. She's running. Oh, she's going to spin it in circles. Here we are. But no, it was the end where like they're threatening to kill her mom.
Oh,
And she takes off one bracelet and she throws it at her mom, and her mom catches the bracelet and just holds the bracelet up. And the guy is there with the gun. And she's like, well, what are you going to do now? And I was like, and then he's like, foiled.
Yes, it did seem like a disappointing end to like I actually got swept up in the entire scheme that Wonder Woman had when, you know, Drew shows up and, you know, they're all enslaved, right? And they're mining for him. And so they hatch this plan to get the bracelets, and it seems to work until, you know, you realize nobody thought to figure out where Radel is. And because the one threat that they had was Radel's going to kill the mom, the queen, if they don't obey, right? And so nobody thought to incapacitate him.
Right.
so that's a flaw in the plan for sure. But anyway, I was kind of swept up in how the whole thing was working. And then that last moment where and I think it's the way Carolyn Jones holds up the bracelet. Like,
it's gotta hold it funny.
Like if they would have done a little kind of you know, weird magical thing where when Wonder Woman threw it, Carolyn Jones like put her wrist up and the bracelet attached to her wrist.
Yeah.
Then she would have had him, you know, like it would have more felt like she could have defended herself. And the truth is, she could probably defend herself by holding it in the weird way that she did, because if he fired at her, she could probably deflect a bullet with it. But it looks like she's barely got a hold of the thing.
Yeah.
Like she's just kind of holding it out in front of her, like, I'm not sure what to do with this, but I've got you.
Yeah. That was kind of why I was like, I was like, okay, all right, okay.
And maybe, you know, maybe on the page, maybe it did magically get on her wrist, but they couldn't figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, some of it was like when you see the bracelet too, you see it's open in the back and it just really looks like a prop.
Yeah.
You know, like some of it was just, they didn't really think through maybe what it would look like in a close up.
Yeah, I feel like they had a lot of different forms of bracelets. Like the bracelets they use for actually deflecting bullets, you know, have charges in them. Like they talked in the pilot about how they worked, and you actually operated them yourself when you had a bracelet on. So they had so that was one kind of bracelet. And then there's the bracelets like that she was holding that's kind of stiff and it's, kind of not very flexible. And then I think they had costume bracelets that they wore that were more like a shiny fabric than hard material. I think for comfort.
And I also realize that we're looking back at this, especially me, I'm looking back at this through the lens of having seen Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, which is hyper realistic and much more realistic, I guess, and that I'm trying to remember that this is probably around the same time frame as Adam West's Batman.
It's
Or no?
I think it's just a few years later. It's
But
like
it's still that
eight
sort
years
of
later.
okay. But it's still kind of, but in my mind, it lives in that sort of that style of
Oh,
show.
absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the people that were involved in creating Wonder Woman were, came from Batman. Like
Yeah, and those
literally
have
they were
their
the same people.
and to me, like that has its own charm. Like part of the reason the show's so good is because some of it's so bad.
Right, right. 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 And it does evolve and change a little bit, but
Yeah,
it's
I'm
in that
sure.
space right now where there's a lot of camp and there's Laura calls it kind of Ed Wood, where they sort of shoot
Hmm.
something and they're like, well, that didn't quite work, and the director's like, no, it's fine, let's move on.
Yeah, it's fine. Just keep going. Yeah,
Yeah, so because it's built for these really tiny TVs that people had that didn't
that's
have
true.
great resolution, and so
And also, I imagine too, like I was just thinking, and I don't know, but was she like the first female superhero that like little girls and women could be like, heck yeah, there's
I
a girl out there doing stuff.
I believe she was. I mean, there were like Batgirl was on Batman, but she was a guest
Right.
star really. She's the first one I believe that had her own show, like that was
Yeah.
headlining, and you saw her every week, and
Because I
um
feel like that's got to be pretty important,
yeah,
like just that the fact that the show is called Wonder Woman and it's a female superhero. She's not a sidekick. She's not a guest star. She's not a love interest.
right,
She's the main character. I feel like that by itself was pretty progressive,
yeah,
and being either I guess being any age woman at that time would have been exciting to see that kind of representation on TV.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so can you do one more Zoom,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about the stuff that you do,
Okay.
because I think we've covered
That's
most of
pretty much,
this.
yeah, that's pretty much the episode.
Yeah,
It really felt like it really felt like it was two episodes to introduce Drew, which is kind of funny knowing that Debra Winger then was like,
yeah. I mean, I have a theory myself that it's two episodes. Like there's the jet pilot plot, and there's the Femium plot,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they wanted to introduce Drew, so they're like, let's take these two stories and make a
Smush,
2 hour
yeah, we'll
thing.
just smush them together. Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah.
they seem, even though they did a good job intertwining them, they seem like they could both exist as separate stories.
Oh, they totally could. Yeah, they
Yeah.
totally could.
So, but there's one more thing I want to say about the show, about the cast, before we continue our ADHD journey to wherever. But but because, and you can just tune me out because I've made a
Is it
commitment.
MASH time?
It's all about MASH.
I'm gonna eat some chocolate. You talk about MASH.
Just two things. So there's this teenager called Tommy. He's one of the people that hits on Drew, and he had like a one line guest spot on MASH where he hits on Margaret Houlihan in much the same way, except he's had a head wound and he's lying in a bed. But but also, and this is, I feel like I could have a scoop here because IMDb tells me nothing. And there is an MP late in the episode when Drew shows up on the base, and an MP stops her. Like these two MPs pull up in a Jeep.
Yeah.
One of them talks to her, and I swear he is a guy he's got like 7 bit parts on MASH. He keeps showing up because he's a super tall, like a big guy. He's beefy and strong, and he's got this really distinctive voice that has a little bit of a southern twang to it.
Who are you? How'd you get in here?
I'm Major Trevor's niece.
Get in. I'll take it to see Major Trevor. Major Trevor should keep better tabs on his relatives. Let's go. Get in.
I swear and the guy's name is James Carroll, although he did most of his career as James Lau, or is it I don't, Lough. I don't know how to pronounce it.
That's
but
probably Lau.
probably Lau.
Like plow.
Right. Exactly. So James Carroll or James Lau, I believe, is this MP. but he's not credited on the episode. He's not credited on IMDb. And I tried to look it up. It turns out that his IMDb has a reel on there, and it's got his agent's email at the end. So I wrote his agent.
Oh my gosh.
Now at press time, I haven't heard back yet, but
probably because you're like,
this.
Who is this lunatic in North Carolina that is obsessed with my client?
I'm like, listen, man, in 1976, you did a guest spot on Wonder Woman.
I think IMDb was not around in the 70s.
Right.
So I think that there are times when you have older shows like that where certain credits just don't make it up there, especially if it was something tiny like that, where he's just essentially just like a little day player, where he just like, or it was TV, so he'd be a co-star, but where he just has that little like 1 or 2 lines about, all right, get in. Well, also, can we just talk about how rough they were with her when she was like, I'm so-and-so's nephew, and they're like, oh, they're just let anybody wander around here, get in. And they kind of like shove her in the Jeep to take her with them, which I thought was kind of funny.
Now, well, let me ask you this, because you've done, so much work with movies. So like he's got a line, but he didn't get a credit. And I thought like that, like just having a line puts you on a different level. It puts you on a different pay level.
Yeah, it does.
But don't you also get a credit?
You're supposed to. Yeah. I mean, there have been times like one of the, so I guess it just depends on like what was going on with the unions and all that stuff at the time, but you're supposed to. So technically, if it's a television show and you have a line, you're considered a co-star. Like a co-star, even though it sounds like it's the top of the ladder, is really the bottom of the ladder. Because it kind of goes co-star, and then you have like co-star, guest star, recurring, and you have all kinds of things like special guest star and things like that. But I mean, like the bare bones of it is usually like co-star, guest star, recurring, series regular, right? So he would have had a co-star role. He would have been like, MP number 2, right? Who had like those 2 lines, and he should have been credited. But there are times, I have one of my first films that I ever did was with, we talked about Officer and the Gentleman earlier. It was not that movie. I don't think I was alive yet, but
no.
It was a Nicholas Sparks movie called Nights in Rodanthe that starred Richard Gere and Diane Lane. Oh. And my character's name was Girlfriend. And I had one line. The line originally was, wow, your mom's looking pretty hot these days, which then got changed to, wow, your mom's looking pretty good these days, because obviously it sounded like I was hitting on her mom. Right. I played the friend of Diane Lane's daughter, and Diane Lane has been like depressed for a long time. And then she's met Richard Gere and they're having this romance, and she's like reading a letter and she's all happy. And so that's why I'm saying, wow, your mom's looking pretty good, but it was originally written as hot, and we had to change it because it looked like I was hitting on her mom. But that being said, like when the film came out, I didn't get credited on IMDb, and I thought, oh well, I just, they probably cut my scene. And then my aunt was like, oh my gosh, I saw the movie and you were great. And I was like, what? And so I got a copy of it and watched it, and sure enough, they didn't cut my scene, and so I had to contact the union, SAG-AFTRA, and have them contact Warner Brothers and say, hey, and they actually came back initially and said, oh, we cut that scene, but it was in the DVD. And so it was just like one person not talking to another person, So if you look at my IMDb, it says uncredited next to the thing, next to my name. But that was a mistake on their part, because they also, James Franco was in that movie as well. He played Richard Gere's son, and they didn't credit him either. So somebody just like fell asleep in the editing room. I don't know. So sometimes it does happen that like something gets missed, right? Especially like for me, I kind of get it, right? Like I had 1 or 2 lines, but like James Franco, I was like, how did you miss crediting him?
Yeah.
So sometimes that just happens,
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's a good segue. So let's talk about your film career. Let's start there. Let's just start with that.
Okay.
So like how, I mean, tell it however you want, but I'm kind of interested in, like I said, like we said, I knew you when you were doing theater. And so how did you get from there to movies?
Yeah, that's a what a great question, Stan. Thanks for asking. Um, well, it kind of, I started doing like right out of school. I did a show with Actors Theater in Charlotte called Betty's Summer Vacation, which is a wacko Christopher Durang show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I felt pretty lucky that right out of school I got this show, and I was like, all right, and then I ended up getting an agent, and that's kind of how I got into film, truthfully. Is getting an it was kind of equal parts, like getting an agent and then also sort of hustling on my own, like paying attention to, there's certain like actor websites and things like that you can pay attention to for like indie film casting calls and stuff like that. I would say, like, well, around the time we were doing Goddess and the Magdalene, I was doing an independent period piece called Wesley up in Winston-Salem, because I used to have to come from like there to come to rehearsal.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember
Yeah,
that.
and back and forth, and so that was I feel like around then was when that really started picking up. Like that was my first, even though it was an indie film, I was playing the romantic lead, so it was like my first really big role in a full film. And film is so interesting compared to theater, just process wise, because you film it out of order, and you don't just start and keep going. You start and stop, and it's out of order, and sometimes you don't meet the people that you're working with until the moment you're working with them.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and then I just, I was out in LA for a little while, and then I came back here for a while. Then I just started working, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna say, and I've had some really interesting opportunities being back here. I actually got to work with Ron Howard a couple of years ago, which was
Wow.
incredible. I was in Hillbilly Elegy, but my character got cut.
Oh no.
Yeah, poor Audrey.
Yeah.
But what was really kind of cool about that is that, one, working with Ron Howard, like, holy cow, right?
Yeah,
And just
yeah.
silently willing him to put me in Willow, like, right. But I played like the movie is about kind of a fish out of water. He's a guy that comes from Appalachia with nothing, and he goes and becomes a lawyer, and he goes off to law school and whatever. So I played one of his friends at law school initially, and so I got to spend, so we had a rehearsal day, which is like unheard of, but it was, Netflix and Ron Howard, so they have the money to have a rehearsal day.
Yeah.
So we had a whole rehearsal day. He rented out a theater and showed us all his Pavarotti documentary,
Oh
which was
wow.
super cool. So I was like sitting there watching, like sitting in the theater, and like Glenn Close walks in front of me with like ice cream, and you're like, that's Glenn Close, you're like, oh, don't freak out, But what was really great about him is being directed by someone who's been an actor. Is there's like nothing like it, because they know how to talk to you.
Yeah.
They know what to say to you. But I thought what was so classy about him was that he wrote me an email himself, like a personal email to me, to tell me that they had cut my scene, and to tell
Wow.
me why they had cut my scene, and that had nothing to do with me as an actor and all of that. And I just thought he didn't have to do that,
Wow.
because it turns out what they wanted to do, I realized this when I watched the film, is that they wanted to make him seem more alone and more isolated. So they cut his entire friend group at school,
Right.
pretty
Right.
much, and refilmed some stuff.
Wow.
And but I just thought it was like, I was like, worth it. I got an email from Ron Howard telling me that I'm great. Like,
That is cool.
it's sort of an interesting thing, film is weird, because you like go do the thing, and you have no idea what's going to happen to it after that, because it's completely, your performance is in the hands of the editor, essentially,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Just to interject, I mean, part of the interesting thing about Wonder Woman is looking at it from an actor's point of view, because, and especially, with this episode, because both Linda Carter and Debra Winger, for both of them, this was their first gig on, well, technically not Linda Carter's first gig. It's her first starring role. And she did a movie along with this. So like the movie, she did the movie first, and then this came out, and then the movie came out. And the same thing happened to Debra Winger. this was her first gig, and she had done a movie, and then the movie came out. And in both cases, the movies, I don't think they're proud of those movies.
Yeah.
Like they're a little bit, I don't want to say sleazy, but
yeah,
they're, it was a good first job to get.
right.
And for both of them, unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, I don't want to put any judgment on it at all, but there was nudity involved. And I think for both of them, that was something they chose not to do after the fact, which makes me think it's something they felt like they had to do.
Probably. I mean, that's a whole like conversation on its own. Like I for a good while I taught and coached actors regularly and would do industry consultations and things like that. And I'm fortunate enough now that I work as a writer, producer, actor, director now, and I coach kind of here and there, but not like full time like I used to. But that's one of the things that I used to talk about, especially with young women in the industry, was just like how to say no, that it's okay to say no, that that kind of thing, because I think especially back then, I feel like the pressure had to be immense without the support that we have now. So like that doesn't surprise me.
Wow. So in addition to, I mean, I don't want to leave this acting discussion because like I saw, oh my God, I can't think of the name of it. The Magic Mike.
Oh yeah, Magic Mike XXL.
Yeah. So you were in that.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling when somebody walks on camera and you're like, oh my God, I know that person. And she's in this movie. So, but I know there are other parts that you've played, but this part in particular, I know that you got to work with Andie MacDowell, and kind of, I don't know if you got close to her, but you developed a relationship with her, which I think is wonderful.
She's amazing. She's super sweet, and I've actually worked with her twice now, and she's really, really wonderful. In Magic Mike XXL, she plays my mom. And funnily enough, like when I auditioned for that, I had no idea that she was going to be playing my mom. I didn't really know anything, because the thing about film auditions that's tough is like when you audition for a theater play, if you're auditioning for Romeo and Juliet, you can just go read it, but with a film, when it's brand new like that, they oftentimes most of the time will not give you the entire script. So when I did my audition for Magic Mike XXL, I auditioned with one scene. I had no idea that Megan was in as much of the movie as my character Megan was in as much of the movie as she was. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like one scene. I knew that it was Magic Mike XXL, but I was like, okay, she's Tito's girlfriend, and this is the scene that I've been given to audition with. But weirdly, I curled my hair that day for the audition because they said like, oh, she's just like a Southern girl that likes to have a good time. And I was like, okay, well, I'll curl my hair. It feels like I should curl my hair. I'm going to curl my hair, not knowing that Andie MacDowell was the one who was going to play my mom, which was kind of funny. And I, when I walked into the audition, it was an in-person audition, which if there are any actors listening, they'll pause for a gasp because we don't do those very often anymore. But it was an in-person audition, and Chad, the casting director, who has since become a good friend of mine, when I walked in, he said, "You look kind of familiar," and I laughed. I said, "Well, I was your waitress 2 years ago." Because the restaurant that I used to work in was next to one of the theaters with the film festival, and so I used to always work like the VIP lounge at the restaurant during the film festival because, duh, right?
Yeah.
And it was just really funny. And we did the audition, and he said, "Girl," he said, "you nailed it dead. Let's just do it again." And he said, "The good news for you is they hate everyone they've seen in New York and LA." Wow. And I was like, okay, that's good. Because oftentimes in the Southeast, what we run into a lot is they'll cast the bigger roles from New York and LA. And so it was really a big deal for me that they chose me, right? That they chose an actor that was essentially, we filmed in Savannah mostly, that they chose a local actor for that role. But Annie McDowell was great. I remember when I met her, she gave me a big hug and she said, you look more like one of my kids than my kids," or something funny. It was something amazing. She really does look like she could be my mom. And she's just so sweet. She's really cool and down to earth. And I had a brief moment in a Hallmark movie. Most of the scenes got cut, but I played a younger version of her in a Hallmark movie called The Beach House.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That they ended up, I guess, for time or whatever, like I had scenes with dialogue. It's flashbacks to her with like her first summer love.
Mm-hmm.
And I had scenes with dialogue and everything, but they reduced it to just me and the guy, like basically like frolicking on the beach in the distance.
Uh-huh.
It was one of those things where I was like, well, but I got to see her again and stuff like that. So yeah, she's a lovely human.
Awesome. Now, so one thing that we normally talk with cosplayers on this show, it's a podcast, it's not a show. So we talk about some of the things that cosplayers get to do sound like kind of the same things that you got to do when you were playing characters, and that's work with kids.
Yeah.
And also I know that you have taught kids, like you've taught acting to kids. So talk about some of that.
Yeah, like I would say it was a really sort of special time in my life. A lot of people will look at children's performers and kind of like the same way they look at like wedding singers, and things like that, where they'll be like, oh, well, clearly, it's a lesser than sort of a thing. And it really still kind of makes me a little bit like about it, because it actually, you think about it and you've got this kid, right? And maybe it's their 6th birthday. They're only going to have one 6th birthday, right? And if they really look up to Wonder Woman and they think Wonder Woman took time out of her day fighting crime to come see them, that's going to impact them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And we did so one thing that I would do like sort of as my general routine, right, is I would come to the party, but I would run the whole party, right? We would do I would read them a story out of Wonder Woman storybook that I would read them, where I learned that apparently she can talk to animals.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Why is this never in anything I've seen?
It is in upcoming episodes. If you want to keep watching Wonder Woman, in fact, in a few episodes, she's gonna run into a gorilla called Gargantua.
Oh.
And
okay.
She tries to talk to him, but he's an evil gorilla, or he's been programmed to be evil. It's very complicated, Carrie Anne. It's very complicated.
It sounds very complicated. But yeah, I learned. But so I would do a little storybook about her. About how her secret identity was Diana Prince and all this kind of stuff. There was one time at a party when I was leaving, because they would always ask where the jet was, and I'd have to be like, well, it's invisible, and I got to be kind of discreet about it. I can't just have it land in your yard. There's no space, and they'd be like, oh, okay, because as long as you could answer them, they were cool, right? But there was one kid's probably remember this. It was so perfect. A jet flew overhead. You couldn't see it, but you could hear it. You could hear the like go overhead, and it was right when I was leaving. I was like, oh, there's my ride. I gotta go, and it was just like perfect timing. But I would read them a story, and then I would give them kind of this like pep talk about what it means to be a superhero. And it was a really good vehicle to talk about being brave, telling the truth, being kind, using, if I was doing a Disney princess, it would be kindness is magic. If I was doing if I was a superhero, kindness is your superpower, right? But it was a really good vehicle to talk to these young kids about, and Wonder Woman is a great example of because she has the lasso of truth and things like that, right? Of talking about how valuable the truth is, what it's like to be brave even when you're scared, and what it's like to be kind to people in a world that's not always kind to you, And we would talk, and I would teach them some kicks and punches, but we'd always have this is for self-defense. We don't use this on friends or family. This is only for bad guys, and I'd make them take this little oath that they wouldn't beat up their friends, and I'd teach them a couple of kicks and punches, and we'd do spins and stuff, and then we just play games and things like that. But I mean, there was one time that I got asked to be Wonder Woman for an adult, and she was in the hospital, and I can't remember why anymore, but she was not doing well, and she was in the hospital, and she was just, Wonder Woman meant a lot to her, and they asked if I would come surprise her at the hospital as Wonder Woman. She couldn't talk very well, but I remember going in, and I remember her face, and she just, she just started crying, but she was happy, and I just sat and hung out with her. And that was, sort of the magic of, like, they know you're not really Wonder Woman, but it's like this moment of suspended reality where, they get to have this experience. And, and that was what meant the most to me, was whether it was with a little kid or whether it was because I did, I would get hired to do like birthday parties and things, but we also did corporate events. We did charity things. We'd go to the children's hospital, which was always challenging because they're so sweet and so brave and they don't even know it, and you go in and you play with them and then you go cry in your car. But yeah, that was, I mean, that I would say was the most meaningful thing to me, was the amount of joy that I was able to bring to them through the guise of Wonder Woman. And it was always entertaining too, because like the parents would be excited too half the time, and then like when the Gal Gadot movie came out, that was cool too, because there was like this resurgence of it. But there's also a cartoon too. There's like a cartoon for kids where she's younger and she wears pants and stuff like that too. But yeah, I mean, I would say that was it, was being able to just really make people happy. I think people underestimate the value of just bringing somebody joy.
Yeah. Wow. And you've taught kids too, right?
Yeah. I for a long time I taught at regular acting classes to kids as young as 3 or 4.
Oh, wow.
All the way up through, all the way up through adults, really. I was also teaching adults as well, but it was interesting, like, you it's different things for different age groups, right? When they're like, I used to teach a class for 4 to 6 year olds, and it was their very first on-camera acting class, and that was always kind of a hoot, because they, at that point you're teaching them how to stand still, how to follow directions, how to be articulate, and how to essentially play pretend on command, because they're really good. They have incredible imaginations, but you have to say, no, I need you to pretend to be scared right now, not a spaghetti monster. Or like teaching them how, because a lot of times for TV and film, when they interview kids, they'll or when they audition kids, sometimes they just want them to do like a little interview, especially if they're really young and they're like not reading age and stuff. They'll say, okay, here's 3 questions. And because I did a lot of private coaching as well. Some of my kids are on Netflix and Hulu right now, and I'm super proud of them.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, one of my girls is on Sweet Magnolias on Netflix. And one of my other kids that I still coach, he's autistic, and I've been his coach since he was 7 years old. He's 13 now. He's also a little filmmaker, so I've helped him make some films too, because I also do that stuff. And I can't say what he booked because it hasn't aired yet, but he booked a recurring role on a major series from something that we worked on. And I'm just really proud of them. But yeah, it's interesting, because when they're that little and they're doing the interview questions, you have to teach them how to say, my favorite color is blue because it reminds me of the ocean, not my favorite color is blue and I had a popsicle last night and it melted and mommy got mad and then I opened the window and I think there's a cat outside. But yeah, I mean, I taught for a long time, and I coached for a long time, and it was really rewarding, just in like watching, because I would have some of these kids, I would have them for years, because they would just come up through the various levels of my classes. I taught between 2 private studios, so I had pre-professional and professional kids, who that was their thing. And I taught some theater, but mostly TV and film, and I still have a couple that I coach here and there. But I've shifted into just doing writer, producer, director, actor work full time now, which is where I was headed. That was always my goal, but it was a nice stop along the way to be able to do that as well.
Awesome. All right. So I'm tempted to ask you lots more questions, but we are running out of time. So before I go any further, so if people want to know, like, is there some place you would direct people to, like, learn more about you or learn more about a project that you're working on?
Yeah, I would say really probably Instagram. It's just my name. It's just / Carrie Anne Hunt at Instagram. At Instagram. That's wow. On Instagram. But that's pretty much where I post about things. I'm also on TikTok, but that's mostly just me like screwing around, just talking about things or playing with funny filters. But I will talk about projects that I'm working on there too. But I think Instagram is probably the best bet.
Is there anything cool you got coming up?
Yes. Yeah, let me think all right, I can do it. Let me see how it's like when somebody asks you when they're like, cool, what's your project about? You're like, I have no idea. Even though you just like spent years working on it and you're like, I don't know what's going on. Yes, actually there's a couple of indie film things coming up that I'm excited about. There is a studio that I work with regularly as a writer and a producer, but also as an actor, because we do cross media stuff. So we've got our hands in comics, we've got TV film stuff going on. There's like all the things, right? But we're getting ready to do a short film at the end of, what month is this? April. At the end of May, we're doing a short film that I'm getting to play the lead in that I'm really excited about. It's a drama. It's bittersweet. It's about a girl on her wedding day who gets to have something she thought she wasn't going to have, and there's a twist to it. So it's really hard for me to explain it without really giving it away, but I'm excited about that. And then I've got another one coming up in the fall or the winter that is I am a producer on and also playing the female lead in, that I'm pretty excited about. It focuses on PTSD and the lack of mental health care for veterans in America. So it's a fictional story, but it's a story that sort of shines a light on that issue. So it's a drama, and I'm looking forward to it because it's modern day. Because a lot of, like, you know this because you know me, but a lot of what I do is period and fantasy and stuff like that. And so I'm excited to have a couple of modern things for my reel. And there's all kinds of other stuff up in the air, but it's just, like always creating stuff and just seeing what sticks, seeing what sticks and who gives us money for it.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been really fun to catch up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hope I see you soon.
Yeah. No, I need to come see you guys. I really do. I miss everybody a lot.
Yeah.
So give Laura a hug for me. Pet all the animals.
I will. All right. Well, take care. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. Bye, fans.
All right. Bye-bye. A big thanks to Carrie Anne for sharing her story with us and diving into Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman for the very first time. Be sure and check out her Instagram and stop by her IMDb page. You may have already seen her in something. You don't know. I also want to thank you for listening. And if you're looking for more classic TV podcasts, check out my links at WonderWomanWednesdays.com. I've added more links like the wonderfully disjointed Here Watch This, a grab bag of rerun reviews by Kristen Hawes and Shan. And I've even added a few podcasts that aren't really about classic TV. I just like them. Like Beauty and the Beast and the Bees, a genre film podcast with Tim S. Turner and Kelly Hogaboom. Lots of great schlock cinema from the 70s to today, and I dare you not to enjoy Tim's infectious laugh. We've got more great episodes coming up, and if you're a cosplayer and want to join me, I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, be kind whenever possible. Spoiler alert, it is always possible.
Where's Wonder Woman?
I don't know.
I think she had to leave.
Diana, it's good to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Everything all right at home?
Everything's fine. I'm fine too.
Drew, where have you been? You had us all worried half to death.
Well, to tell you the truth, I was on...
It's a long story, Steve, and let's just say that Drew is acting like a teenager. The really important thing is that she's back with us and safe, isn't it?
That's right, Diana. But don't you scare us like that again, okay?
Yes, sir.
You know, it's too bad about Wonder Woman. I wanted to thank her. Tell her once again how much I appreciate her help.
I'm sure she knows that. Didn't you get that impression, Drew?
Yes, I did.
Well, this calls for a celebration. And it's on me. Huh?